G'day there guys, it's your main man Markee, back at it again with another episode of r/JustnoHOA. Now if you hate the HOAs just like I do, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and get ready for some bloody good content. Posted by user NerdLover2528. Titled, You want the HOA to enforce the rules? I live in a small subdivision that has an HOA. You've all heard horror stories about HOAs, but this one is actually really relaxed in the compliance department. The HOA is still ran by the developer, and the management is outsourced to a third-party company. So no head of the HOA Karen that lives in the neighborhood consistently monitoring everything. We do, however, have a private Facebook neighborhood group. My neighbor is a complainer. He always complains about the ineffective HOA because people have installed sheds and above-ground pools. While these things are discouraged, they are allowed with the ARC approval. Basically, email the management company a modification request with the specs and pictures and they approve it. So all the stuff he is complaining about has more than likely been approved by the HOA management company. I don't think my neighbor is aware of this because he complains about it every few months like clockwork. So earlier this month, I noticed my neighbor and a few other houses in the neighborhood had put out political yard signs in their yards. According to the HOA covenants, this is prohibited and there is no approval process. It's just not allowed. So I emailed the guy at the management company that handles our HOA to let him know. He emailed everyone that day to remind them that yard signs are prohibited and gave everyone 7 days to remove them before they get a violation. My neighbor posted last week about receiving a violation in the mail. He was ticked. But hey, he wanted an effective HOA, right? If the HOA ever gets turned over to the residents, don't ever let that guy get any position of power, however minor. Frankly, I fear the day our HOA moves from developer control to resident control. As far as I can tell, they end up getting run by people who have the time and who have opinions. This is not the pool of people you want running your HOA. Ah yes, the Have Opinions Association. I'm familiar. Yeah, our former HOA president hid the fact that our building is over 10k in debt so that more people would move in. It also came to light that one of the, council members, I don't go to our HOA meetings because of the chaos, one of the people whose votes mattered, died. But the HOA president didn't say anything and just pretended that he just didn't show up to the meeting so she could pass a decision that she knew the dead guy would have voted against. When all this came to light, she had to step down, but I don't think she had much option. Also, when we moved in, she protested letting us have our geriatric golden retriever on the property because she thought he'd be too disruptive. But he literally just sleeps all day. In the 2+ years I've owned him, the most noise I've heard him make is the occasional dramatic sigh. Meanwhile, my downstairs neighbor has a tiny dog that yaps non-stop, bites other people and dogs, gets out all the time, and I can personally attest that me and my roommate, on separate occasions, have had to pick that dog up after it escaped and tried to go after my dog. Posted by user Rena Jackson, titled, Fudging Karen. I have the biggest Karen living in my neighborhood. So, we bought our home 3 years ago. At the time of purchase, we signed a set of bylaws for the subdivision that were laid out in the 60s when the neighborhood was being built. These rules included things like you couldn't have a separate building such as a shed, pool house, carport, garage. Now, several, I wouldn't even go as far as to say the majority of homes, including mine and my grandparents, who moved in 77, have RV covers, carports, sheds or workshops, and the house across the street has a pool house. So needless to say, the original bylaws were never upheld. In October of 2018, we had our little girl at 26 weeks, and spent the next 4 months in NICU. In December, on one of the rare occasions I came home, a neighbor came by with some paperwork saying there was a house renting on VRBO and it needed to be taken care of. I needed to sign this paper and get it back to her by the 31st of December so she could get it filed. I ignored the issue. I don't care what someone else does with their property as long as it doesn't affect me, which this never did. The house was rarely rented out, and when it was always a really quiet, I never heard anything, saw trash thrown about, etc. Anyway, apparently she gathered enough signatures to amend the original bylaws to include a ban on renting VRBO. She then took the homeowner, who lived in a different state by the way, to court, won, and had it put in the judgment that they had to sell their freaking house. So at this same time, she came up with the idea of starting an HOA. That way, our neighborhood could stay safe and be able to take care of any problems that would arise. No elaboration. October 2019, she then began collecting signatures to add a new amendment to include forming an HOA. She and another lady in our neighborhood who was a notary collected and notarized signatures. Once she believed she had her 2/3 vote she thinks she needed, she filed the paperwork. She had been having neighborhood meetings. I know of 19 of 47 homeowners who were never notified of the meetings, until I found out about one and posted a sign at the end entrance/exit of the subdivision. Once we all showed up at this meeting, we were informed that the HOA had passed and we were all obligated to follow the rules and pay the dues that would be determined. I, along with the other 19 homeowners, made it very clear we were not part of any HOA and would not be participating or paying any dues. Shortly after this, I received an email saying that board members would be voted on via email and $25 yearly dues were due, and I could make my check payable to her name. Other homeowners received an email saying that there was a one-time initiation fee of $115 plus the $25 yearly due, and thanking them for their contribution for legal fees for taking the VRBO house to court. Like, how much money has this lady got out of people? All this to say, I checked her math multiple ways: votes per lot, votes per fraction of a lot, votes per number of owners, like every stupid way possible. The only way I can think I didn't do it was by value of the home to value of the entire subdivision. Anyway, she never had over a 60% vote in favor for starting a POA. They probably mean HOA. I've called her out on it, and she refuses to acknowledge it. She is a real estate agent, and there are a couple of houses in the neighborhood for sale. I looked at the listings and noticed that one, who signed for the HOA, has association fees of $25. The other home, who did not sign for the HOA, does not have association fees listed. She's also now, well, I'm sorry I don't know for sure who, someone has called the city on all of us heathens that won't sign the HOA. So the city has been writing warnings to almost everyone for something or another. Mine for a pile of brush left after cleaning out a flower bed, and my grass being over 6 inches. Neighbour for a stack of tile in her driveway, another for having a ladder and an inflatable boat on a dolly in their yard, another for leaves in the ditch, and so many other crazy offences. Obviously she's calling the city because she knows the HOA can't do anything, or at least she knows we know she can't do anything. My concern is she's taking advantage of the elderly in the neighborhood that feel like the HOA is making them safe. She asked my elderly neighbor if she needed any groceries, since she couldn't get out with all the COVID around. My neighbor said no, she was fine. Then the lady turned around and said, "Oh, okay, well, do you have your $25 for dues?" My neighbor's exact words were, "I gave it to her. I'm afraid of what she would do to me if I didn't." Not that she thought she was being physically threatened, but she literally thinks she could lose her home over not paying these bullies. Is there anything I can try to give or say to these elderly to make them not feel threatened by her or the other board members? I have plenty more details if you have questions. I know some states have laws about extorting the elderly. You might want to look into that. If you can, a lawyer will help you better find out if it applies here. Also, she's using the city inspectors to harass them. Anything with old people being taken for money, I call adult protection services. The coming around to ask questions can be a deterrent in itself. I thought that was for stuff like carers and family members stealing money or medical neglect. Do they also cover stuff like OP's situation? If they're illegally collecting money from older people that don't understand what's happening, I would call, because it sounds like a scam. I wonder if you can also leverage that against those horrible scam cold calls. My grandpa's wife keeps falling for those. She's got dementia, and forcing him to pay money to them. That Happens a Lot says, all states have laws governing how HOAs are supposed to work. Honestly, I'd ask to see the notary's logbook of all the signatures and the addresses to confirm with the homeowners that they did in fact vote for this. Some don't keep logbooks, but there are still records of who voted yes. If you think the notary was in on it, look up notary misconduct in your state for who you need to report it to. Also, I make my HOA checks out to Neighborhood HOA. It's highly suspect that she wanted checks made out to her. Ask for financial records immediately, and when, note I said when, she doesn't produce them, or she shows her paying herself, file a complaint against her with the real estate board. She really should know not to mix money, and basic accounting says you get a business license for a legal entity. I guess I would be worried if she's pocketing the money and faked the signatures, all of which are fraud. A police report starts a paper trail, even if no charges are possible due to her harassment. I agree with your second point heavily, and this indicates to me that she didn't set up the HOA correctly and legally. Having been through something very similar to this, I'm going to add that you need to publicly disclaim any indebtedness to this HOA of any kind. You cannot be compelled to join an HOA that is formed retroactively, and if there are no common areas, there is no HOA, full stop. You should immediately send out certified mail to each and every homeowner in your subdivision specifically denying the debt and any indebtedness thereof. You should also publicly state a demand for documents, including articles of incorporation, tax filings, state and local filings, all correspondence, and so on. And whatever you do not speak with anyone. You should communicate only in certified mail. You may also have personal cause against the realtor and can go after her license for this. I certainly would. It took a monumental effort on my and my wife's part to drive this devil out of our 40-home 2-street subdivision, but we did it. There is no HOA here, and there never will be. The fact that some smart-ass piece of crap realtor thought he could do this was what started all of it. I will tell you this. My wife believes it was something much larger than the work of this jackass, and I did not, and it goddamn near cost us our marriage over the fights we had. You need to immediately lawyer up, file suit against this realtor for what she has done, and start burying this tramp with paper, including demands for documents. I would also immediately demand to know who the legal counsel is. You can also go pull up all legal findings this fudging moron made. They may be defective. You can't just spin up an HOA without a hell of a lot of work, including federal filing. Bet she didn't do that. But as I said, if you have no common area, there is no HOA. What they are doing is extortion, and the fact that they are now trying to compel you to join them is illegal. They can't full fudging stop. This is what happens when some fricktard decides to be a big shot. Posted by user Hello Friends, titled HOA Levy Fines Even Though Not Part of HOA. Location, Kissimmee, Florida. Situation: my parents had an existing fence on their property that was falling apart. They tore the old fence and built the new one without a building permit. A couple of months later, they receive a notice from the HOA stating that they are in violation of the governing document because they had fencing installed without filing a building permit with Osceola County, or notifying the Architectural Control Committee as per the deed restrictions requirements. My parents are not part of the HOA. The notice also includes the following statement: additionally, our records indicate that you are not a member of the redacted Homeowners Association. We highly suggest that you complete the enclosed application and submit this with the annual dues of deducted. They were invited to attend an HOA meeting to contest these fines. However, they were unable to attend due to an emergency. Since they did not attend the meeting, the HOA levied a $1,500 fine and planned to file a property lien against their home. My parents tried to get more information, but the number provided does not return their calls. At the moment, I am trying to pull deed records from the county to determine if there are any deed restrictions. I plan to help the folks contact the HOA representatives if they do another meeting regarding the fine. Questions: can the HOA impose fines if my parents are not part of the HOA, or is it dependent on what the deed restriction says? It just appears counterintuitive to not be part of an HOA, yet these have to still receive personal approval for a fence regardless of deed restrictions. Outcome: We are hoping to remove the fine. Thanks in advance for any help. Funk Doctor says, an HOA cannot fine someone if their lot isn't part of the association full stop. And that addendum you mentioned makes it seem pretty clear that they do not think you are part of it either. If your search shows that there are really no deed restrictions, then you don't have to have the fine rescinded since it's not valid. If your search does show something, contact a lawyer immediately as you will need pro help. The very fact they apparently issued a fine to a unit they know isn't a part of the association is pretty outrageous on its own. OP says, I was finally able to find the deed. However, it was only 1 page, and the document contained the following. This deed, not effective until redacted. This indenture, made the redacted day of redacted AD, redacted by redacted Secretary, Department of Housing and Urban Development of Washington, D.C., herein called the grantor, who post office address is redacted, to parent. Witnesseth, that the grantor, for and in consideration of the sum of redacted, and other valuable considerations, receipt whereof is hereby acknowledged, hereby grants, bargains, sells, aliens, premises, releases, conveys, and confirms unto the grantee all that certain land situates in Osceola County, State of Florida, viz. Lot redacted. I'm sorry, I can't read this. I'm just going to put the screenshots of these on screen. You can read them all if you want. That's pretty epic. It is a very long deed. Heathen Chaser says, not a lawyer, but that looks to be just a part of the HUD purchase contract. I had a similar statement in my FHA purchase agreement for my home. If your parents kept all of their mortgage paperwork, and there was no mention of HOA within it, then they need to contact their real estate agent and or title insurance to determine if that house is indeed part of the HOA. The county deed office might be able to help as well. Left Penguin says, if the HOA is trying to put a lien against your parents' house, I suggest you find a real estate attorney. If you are part of the HOA but were not notified when purchasing the house, then you could try using your title insurance. I did not even think about title insurance. Thanks. I contacted my parents to call their title insurance. Hopefully it can shed some light, but in the meantime, I told the folks to assemble any sales documents for review. Back to the original post, OP puts, edit. I received clarifying information from the folks. HOA has yet to put a lien on the property, they only threatened. Update 1 is about the deed we just read out. Update 2. I found the record plat and saw no mention of the HOA. Nonetheless, I told my parents to call the title company for more details. I will sort through their sales documentation later tonight. Update 3. Unfortunately, I found the restrictions document/covenant titled Restrictions on Real Estate for Redacted Subdivision, and my parents' lot/record plat. I found the documents on the county recording website, and it says, no building shall be erected, placed, or altered on any lot until the construction plans and specifications and a plan showing the location of the structure have been approved by the Architectural Control Committee as to the quality of workmanship and materials, harmony of external design with existing structures, and as to location with respect to topography and finish grade elevation. I hope that helped some of you guys out on your HOA endeavors. Posted by user Cafe Now, titled Notified HOA of Intent to Build Fence. President called to inform us of gentleman's agreement. Location, Michigan. We moved into a new house earlier in the year and noticed homes don't have fences unless there is a pool built. During the home buying process, we requested the bylaws multiple times and never received them, and even had our friends who live in the neighborhood post on the HOA Facebook page asking about fences. The answer on the Facebook post was that the city restrictions on fences are more stringent than the HOA's. Once we moved in, I got access to the Facebook page and found the bylaws, and the only thing about fences talks about how tall they need to be and how they can only be in the backyard. No requirement to notify the HOA or anything. When I mailed in our ballot for new board of directors, I included a note stating our intent to build a fence and that I reviewed the bylaws and city requirements and I would make sure I follow the rules there. Signed with my name and number, and the president called my husband upon receipt of the letter to tell him about the gentleman's agreement that people won't get fences unless they get a pool. There is nothing about this in the bylaws. I roll over them calling my husband instead of me. We do intend to get a pool in the next couple years, but a fence is our first priority to keep our young children and the dog in our property line. Both our neighbours do not have a problem with us getting a fence. I want to keep an open line of communication with the HOA for the sake of keeping a positive relationship. But is there any legal enforcement they have over us building a fence without having a pool first? Thanks. I'm still stuck at you not getting a copy of the CCRs and bylaws. When I bought my condo, those were in the disclosure documents I got when I signed the intent contract. I've been annoyed with this too. I know it's a very casual HOA. Technically, we've never received the bylaws. I just came across them on the Facebook page. But we never signed any bylaws or anything. Print them off in case they try to change it since it's just on Facebook. I'm not a lawyer. If there's nothing in the CC&Rs, bylaws, or house rules, you are free to do whatever you want. A gentleman's agreement is not legally enforceable. I'm not a lawyer either, but I've taken contracts. Some gentlemen's agreements are enforceable. It all depends on the context. But if there was no actual agreement, gentleman or otherwise, between OP and the HOA, then it's probably not enforceable. True, a verbal contract is legally enforceable. However, in the case of HOAs, when you close on a property, you are required to sign the bylaws, thereby agreeing to be bound by those terms. The HOA cannot add verbal terms to the agreement after the fact unless it follows its due process for amending the CC&Rs or bylaws. If the HOA wants to restrict building fences, it needs to follow its due process, and the president claiming a gentleman's agreement won't cut it in court. Posted by user CamCab04, titled, "Can they do this?" We bought an apartment 3 years ago. Recently, our HOA decided that they did not like doormats being outside of our apartment, the standard ones, because it's a fire hazard? The thing is, we live in Florida. It rains every day in the summer, and shoes get wet and muddy, especially when my husband is a botanist. I find it a little strange for a rule to be made like that, and so sudden. I think it was because the lady that cleans outside was annoyed by them more than anything. I understand it can be annoying, but can't they just give us a date and time, and we will bring them when cleaning is going to happen? This HOA has made pretty sudden rule changes, which no one seems to be allowed to vote on. My husband joined the HOA board after they suddenly said we couldn't have visitors after 7 p.m. any day of the week unless we notified the head lady in advance. I feel like I don't know what is actually allowed and what is not. I would have never moved here if they had those rules at the time, but they didn't until this past year. It does seem a bit litigious. I think getting your husband on the board is a good idea, as he can help steer the ship a bit. Look up your rules and regs. There are usually stipulations about how the rules and regs can be changed by an ownership vote or by a board vote with a certain amount of notice, etc. Unless they are breaking any rules, there isn't much you can do. Giving notice for visitors after 7 seems absolutely ridiculous. I would fight this tooth and nail. I doubt that they are allowed to do this. Yes, the visitors after 7 is what is really upsetting. We're in our late 20s, and having friends over during our last few years without kids is a huge hassle. What's crazier is we have 2 parking spots, but we only have 1 car when we have visitors over. They can park in our parking spot so we aren't taking anyone's space. We would usually tell our friend to carpool so they could park in the extra spot. With this change, they get towed after 7. We went on vacation and took my car, so my mum left her car in our spot. We didn't say anything because we figured it's our parking spot, and we aren't even using the second that we own as well, and we got towed. While the towing is petty and seemingly a waste of money and resources, I'm sure your complex simply pays a company to go around and point out cars to tow. They probably don't have any other guidance other than tow every car without a placard, or tow every non-registered car. If it's the former, you should share placards with guests, and if it's the latter, they just suck. Sounds like you need more clear R&Rs. No idea about your local laws, but when I lived in a condo in New York City, the New York City Fire Code expressly prohibited anything being kept in the corridors of a multi-family dwelling, including doormats, holiday decorations, umbrella stands, etc. So it could be a fire code issue, but more likely you have a Karen on the board. I lived in New York City as well when I was a kid. Apartments there are indoors, so I think that is why. I'm in Miami, everything is outdoors. I would get for the fire department to get through, but it's a really wide hallway and there is ample room. Oftentimes, logic has absolutely nothing to do with fire codes. It's a case of, this is the law, like it or lump it. Alright, that's where I think I'm going to end today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Tell me what you thought of it down below, and I hope you have a good day, night, sleep, whatever you're up to. Say hi to outro Markee. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this one today. Tell me what you thought of it down in the comments below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I would love you to subscribe because I love your face and I love seeing you here every single day that you are here in this video. I don't know what else to say today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content. I do have a second channel that's called Markee 2. Link should be up on the screen somewhere here if you don't have adblock installed. If you don't know where to find the channel, you can go to my main page. Just click on the Markee face and it should be on the right, somewhere there, or on channels if you're on phone. Hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.